Hey everybody, Coldon here with another VOX Immortalis commentary guide. This video is for normal mode for Madness of Deathwing, the final boss in Dragon Soul, and this is 10-man. So I was actually pleasantly surprised at how this encounter turned out, considering I was worried since you don't get to fight Deathwing sort of in his ultimate dragon form, and I guess that's because of his size, but this actually turned out to be a pretty cool encounter. And so I'm quite pleased with what they went with. Essentially, you have these four platforms, and at any given time you can switch between them just by walking off the side, and Thrall will sort of float you over. And then the order that you actually attack everything on the platform will determine slightly how the fight goes. This is because each of the four platforms is guarded by a dragon aspect. And each aspect gives your raid pretty much one passive buff and one sort of activated buff that does different things, based on what's happening. So that the order that you decide to do the platforms will alter slightly the strategy that you might need for the rest of the fight. Once you kill the main tentacle, the wing or the arm tentacle on a given platform, the aspects, benefits that you got from that platform are gone for the rest of the fight. So you need to plan sort of in reverse which aspect benefit you want the most, and then go backwards from there. And then the least important one, you should start on that platform and work your way down. So for our raid, we decided to do a 1 tank, 2 heal setup. And this, I don't know if this is designed for 1 or 2 healers, but it is definitely designed for 2 tanks, and this is due to one mechanic I'll explain in a bit. But essentially, we found that with enough DPS, we could actually skip that requirement of 2 tanks, and obviously, also using only 2 healers, we get a bunch of extra DPS that we wouldn't otherwise have. So our order that we did the platforms, and therefore got rid of the aspect buffs, is based solely on maximizing our DPS and not worrying so much about survival and healing. So I'll explain the order that we did it and why we did it that way, and then we'll loop back around through the whole fight itself, and I'll go over the actual mechanics on each platform and how you deal with it. So the first platform we did was the far left one facing Deathwing, and this is Alexstrasza. And basically the passive ability for Alexstrasza is you gain 20% max health on the raid. Pretty simple. The passive ability on Alexstrasza is sort of hard to explain since you haven't seen it, but twice during each platform phase you'll get blistering tentacles that will spawn, and these do massive stacking AE damage to the raid, and you have to sort of DPS them down quickly. But Alexstrasza actually kills these for you when he's active, or is it she? I don't know. When Alexstrasza is active, kills these tentacles within 5 seconds, so you don't have to worry about them. So if that seems like something you need, you should save Alexstrasza for one of your last aspects. The second platform we're doing here is Ysera, and the passive ability from this is 20% extra healing. Pretty simple. And then the active ability is actually a new activatable icon that everyone in the raid gets, and you can see mine in the sort of bottom left there to the left of my character frames. And this is an ability called Dream, and it's much like the Heroic Will ability on Ultraxion. In fact, if you saw that video, you can use the same macro to use it, which is /click space extra action button. First letter in the word capitalized, or extra action button 1, sorry. So if you use that macro or click the button, you'll gain Dream, which is 5-second duration and reduces damage you take by 50%. And you can use this every 30 seconds. So, of course, if you need survival, extra healing and this very short duration cooldown really help your raid for Ysera. So anyway, we did her second, and then third, we're going to the left, so the second platform from the left for Nusdormu. And his buff is 20% haste on the raid, passively. And then his active buff is, again, somewhat hard to explain, but it's essentially, it slows down the movement of the Elementium Bolt that you'll get throughout the platform phase. And this benefits you a lot DPSing that down. But I'll talk more about that later. And then the final platform we do, the one we save for last because it's the highest DPS boost and we wanted it to last the longest, is from Kaligos. So Kaligos gives 20% passive damage boost to everyone. And the second ability is not actually an active, it's just another passive. Basically, all your attacks or spells, when you have the buff, will cause 20,000 arcane damage around the target of your attack within 6 yards. So basically, every time you attack something or hit it with a spell, around 6 yards of that target, you do 20,000 extra arcane damage. And this is obviously really strong for any AE attacks that you might do. And we do that quite a bit. So the combination of those two passives meant that he seemed like the best one to save for last for our raid makeup. And that's what we went with. Anyway, obviously you can mix and match the order that you do platforms to the benefit of your raid. So, if you're using 2 tanks and 3 healers and survival's really not an issue, you might want to do the same thing and keep the DPS ones till the end. But you can obviously change the order. One thing you might really want to consider is Alexstrasza last if you're having a problem healing the blistering tentacle damage, which we'll talk about more later. If everything else is pretty easy to heal, but when those spawn, you just get overloaded, then obviously saving Alexstrasza to kill those for you would really help. So that's just something to consider, that kind of thing. Or if the Elementium Bolt is a real problem, then you probably want to save Nozdormu till last, because he'll really help you with that kind of thing. Anyway, so let's go ahead and loop back through and talk a bit about the overall platform mechanics and how we actually deal with those. All right, so now that we're back at the start, I'll talk a little bit about the individual mechanics on the platforms, the ads that you see, and how you deal with the overall fight mechanics. So even though the aspects obviously offer you various benefits and the order is important, the overall order that you do things on a given platform will not change too much regardless of the order of the aspects that you do, order of the platforms. So immediately when you start on a platform, you should attack the main tentacle, the wing or arm tentacle, to do a little bit of extra DPS to it. But you're waiting for the mutated corruption in the back to spawn, which it has done so. And as soon as this appears, all DPS need to switch to it. And shortly after it appears, it will cast Impale on the tank. So make sure your tank picks it up. Impale has a 4-second cast, and when it lands, it does really heavy damage to the tank, enough that they need a strong cooldown to survive. So obviously if you have Ysera active still, the tank can use Dream, and that's a really good mitigation for that. Otherwise, just a regular tank cooldown will suffice. Your healer should also try to land a big heal as that 4-second cast is finishing. There's a slight delay. It's not immediately after the 4 seconds, so just be aware of that. So that another follow-up melee hit doesn't kill the tank, obviously. The other thing is once Impale hits the tank, it applies a 45-second debuff that causes future Impale damage on that person to increase by 100%. So this means that if you don't have enough DPS, the next Impale will land when that debuff has about 10 seconds left. And if that hits the tank for extra 100% damage, it's unsurvivable unless you have an anti-death cooldown. So I mentioned before, this is the only mechanic that requires 2 tanks. And unfortunately, I'm not a fan of that kind of encounter design from Blizzard, but whatever. So if you can do this with 1 tank, nothing else in the fight requires a second tank, and you'll get a lot of DPS benefit or healing benefit, whatever it might be. So we found that by getting enough DPS on the mutated corruption, we could kill it before the second Impale goes off. To do that, you need to kill it in about 40 seconds from the time it spawns. You could also, I said, if you can't kill it in fast enough, you can survive that second Impale with an anti-death cooldown like Ardent Defender or Guardian Spirit, something like that. Anyway, so I highly recommend 1 tank if you can find a way to do that. That'll help a lot. The other ability that the mutated corruption tentacle has is sort of a slam effect. And this is cast about every 10 seconds on a random raid member. And it does a cone attack of physical damage, hitting them and anyone within that cone. So ideally, when you're attacking a mutated corruption, you should be sort of in a semicircle around it, so that hopefully only 2 or 3 people at most will get hit by that slam cone attack, and not a big chunk of people. This will help your healers a bit. As a healer, I found that healing that was sort of a pattern I got used to pretty quickly, where as long as no more than 3 or 4 people got hit, you would use your globals and efficient heals, and by the time they were about full health, they would be getting hit with the next slam effect. So I also tend to think it actually targets different players each time, but it can hit the same group, obviously, if it's if they're all lined up. At any rate, that's the mutated corruption. So you want to focus all your DPS on that and burn it down immediately, with one exception, and that is the Elementium Bolt, which should be spawning in a moment here. This is the top priority for your DPS, and there it's cast by Deathwing right there. And when he casts this, he throws a bolt toward the back of the platform that you're on, and it will fly in really quickly. You saw it just appear almost, but now it's going really slowly, and it should be attacked by everyone. The reason that it's slow is because of those Dormu's secondary effect, his active effect, which is that swirling time zone area you see under us. So when the Elementium Bolt flies in, it goes really quickly and tries to land in the back of the platform. But when it hits the time zone, if it's active from Nusdormu, it will move really, really slowly, and this will allow you to kill it well before it actually lands. So that's Elementium Bolt's your top DPS priority. So if that's active and you still have a mutated corruption, kill the Elementium Bolt and then go back to the corruption, finish it off. If the bolt lands on its destination, it will do a huge AE to the raid. It's around 180,000, I want to say. Actually, it could be higher. The damage itself is actually based on the distance you are from the landing point. So the further away you are from the landing spot, the less damage you'll take. And you'll see that later on. It is survivable if you're not near it and you have raid cooldowns going. But ideally, you want to have it slowed by Nosdormu whenever possible. So we do that for the first 3 platforms, but the final one we don't have a slow, and you'll see that in a second. So after the bolt and the mutated corruption, the next set of adds you'll get are based on the health of the arm or wing tentacle. So at around, I think it's 65 or maybe 66 and 33 is probably what it is. A third of the health basically each time. You'll get blistering tentacles, and these spawn in sets of 6. They're attached to the main arm or wing, and they're immune to AoE damage. So no cleaves or anything like that. It has to be all single target damage. If you do an AE, it'll go off, but it won't actually hit them. So something to be aware of. Essentially, these blistering tentacles are pretty deadly. I would say the single most damaging thing throughout the platform phases, depending on the order of the platforms you do, I guess. But when they spawn, they will immediately start casting blistering heat, which is just a stacking dot on everyone in the raid. And this will do about 2,500 damage at 0 stacks, and then it adds 5% damage per tick for every stack. And since it applies basically every second, you have to kill them off quickly. The damage is also based on how many of the blistering tentacles are alive. So since they're immune to AE, you want to just focus on 1 or 2 really quickly and burn them down and just cycle through them. So if you're going to use healing cooldowns or raid cooldowns, other than the landing for the Elementium Bolt, definitely for the blistering tentacles is the best time to do it. The final set of add types that you'll get on the platform phases are the little bloods called regenerative blood, I think. They basically appear once, and they should be picked up by your tank. And your tank should tank them somewhere that you can AE them efficiently. So you'll notice that after the bolt and the mutated corruption, we all stack up right in melee range. This is for efficient AE healing, but it's also to kill off the blood really quickly. So for stationary AE types, like my mushrooms as a druid, I can just plop those down on our stack spot, and then they'll hit the blood when we need to AE them. You need a certain level of DPS to actually kill the blood with AE because they have energy, and when they spawn, they're at 0 energy, and they gain 10 per second. But after 10 seconds, they'll be full, and they'll fully heal themselves. So if you can't kill them within 10 seconds of AE, you should actually do single target to burn them down. So you can see the blood spawned, our tank pulls them to our spot, and we just burn them down really quick. And pretty simple. So that shouldn't be much of a problem if you have enough DPS to AE them. And remember that Caligos applies that 6-yard AE effect to all your damaging effects. So if you can save him till last, then you'll have a lot of AE damage to burn those guys. And then again, at the 66 and 33%, you'll get the blistering tentacles. So you get them twice per phase, whereas the blood are only once per phase. And once those are gone, then you have one final ability per platform, which is Cataclysm. And you saw Deathwing was just casting it there. So 2.5 minutes into each platform, he will start to cast Cataclysm. And this is a 60-second cast channel. And if he finishes it, he wipes the raid and destroys the world. So bummer. So basically, you have to have enough DPS, it's sort of the Hardened Rage, to kill off a particular platform's tentacle within 3.5 minutes, each of them at most. So again, if you can manage one tank and or 2 healers, that's a lot easier to do. So this final platform we're on the 4th one. So now we've lost all our buffs except the 20% damage buff from Caligos. So the main thing we don't have here is Nosdormu's time zone that I mentioned. So to plan for that, we are going to take the AE damage from the Elementium Bolt. So once it's about to land, everyone's going to move close to the tentacle to get far away from the landing point and use all our raid cooldowns and try to heal through the damage and then burn it down once it lands. So it's doable, as you'll see, but it can be somewhat difficult. And I should also make special note that the damage that it deals when it lands, as I said, it's based on the distance from the landing point, but it's not, a smooth transition. So if you look, I almost die there. And if you look at my position, I'm actually taking about 80,000 more damage from that hit in our logs than people that were at the blue marker. So I screwed up quite a bit, and I should have moved up just a few yards before it hit. But that distance is a huge difference. So they took around 75 or 80,000 damage at the blue marker or beyond, and I took like 160,000. So it's a huge difference for that small gap. Something to be aware of. Anyway, so that's everything except one final effect. If you look at the target frame of Wing Tentacle, my target frame, on the right, there's a stacking buff that it's gaining. It's at 36 right now and 37. So that is a sort of dot that's pulsing on the raid throughout the entire fight, except the last phase. And this is basically a damage increase, and it's based on the health of the wing or arm tentacle, and it's inversely proportional. So at 99%, it's basically 1 stack, and at 1%, it's 99 stacks. So at 1 stack, it does about 3,000 damage per tick, and at, when the wing tentacle is at 1%, basically 99 stacks, it's doing around 35,000 per tick. So tenfold the amount. So something to keep in mind. It does not increase the damage from blistering tentacles AE. Something to be aware of, at least on normal. Might on heroic, but I triple check that. So, but it will make things harder as the particular tentacle phase progresses, since that's this pulsing damage that keeps increasing. So the second set of blistering tentacles, because it's at 33% of the main guy, the pulse plus the blistering tentacle damage will be pretty heavy. So your cooldowns should generally be later on in the phase rather than earlier for any given platform. Anyway, once you finished all 4 tentacles and platforms, Deathwings will slump over. He'll be at 20%, and you just move over to him. And this final phase, you get these 3 Elementium fragments, which don't need to be tanked. They just spawn randomly. You should DPS them immediately. And shortly after they spawn, they'll cast a shrapnel debuff on 3 random raid members. This lasts about 7 or 8 seconds, and when it expires, it does really heavy physical damage to the player. But once this phase begins, you have... So there's actually shrapnel on me. Anyway. So you have all the benefits of the aspects once again. So this means you actually have the dream buff or ability again. So people with shrapnel should use dream when there's about 3 or 4 seconds left on shrapnel, so that the dream will mitigate the damage 50%. It's very much like the Ultraxion when you have fading light on you, and you have 3 or 4 seconds left on that. You should use heroic will to mitigate it. It's the same sort of thing here. If you do that properly, then it shouldn't be too much trouble to heal. The final thing is you get 2 Elementium Terror adds. Those should be tanked and killed immediately. And especially if you're using one tank, they do really heavy damage to that tank. But the raid healing is not that significant here. So just have your healers spam the heck out of that tank, and then you should be fine. Once those 2 sets of adds are dead, you should have a gap, and you're just waiting for the process to repeat while you beat on Deathwing. So you can see there's some pulsing raid damage that continues to hurt on us a bit, but it's around 30,000 a tick, I believe. So just watch for that. And then the next set of tentacles should be spawning here quickly, but we're going to just ignore them and actually finish him off since he's pretty low. So yeah, that was normal Madness of Deathwing. It's a pretty cool encounter, and I think it's appropriately challenging for normal. Not a walk in the park, but definitely room for increased challenge on heroic, I'm sure. So good luck, and thanks a lot for watching.